In 1500, a woman who wanted a man didn't send him a message. She didn't follow him on any social network. There was no signal he could ignore from the comfort of his bed. If she wanted him, she had to act. And she had to act with surgical precision, because one mistake could literally cost her everything. Not her reputation, everything. Marriage at that time was not about love. It was an economic contract. An alliance between families, a transfer of property disguised as a religious ceremony. So when a woman decided she wanted a specific man, not the one her father chose, not the one convenient for the family, she was playing a dangerous game with rules she had not written. And yet many of them played it with an intelligence that history took centuries to recognize. The first tool was not beauty, it was calculated visibility. In a society where middle and upper-class women spent most of their time inside their homes or in exclusively female spaces, appearing in the right place was itself an act of will. Church services were one of the few places where men and women from different families shared the same air. It is no coincidence that a huge number of love stories from the 15th and 16th centuries begin exactly there. She would arrive a little earlier, position herself where he could see her without it seeming intentional. She wore the colors her family could afford, but with one detail: a ribbon, an embroidered flower that distinguished her from the rest. It was not vanity, it was strategy. And here comes the part that history books rarely mention: the language of the handkerchief. Across Western Europe around 1500, there existed a fully functional gestural code that women used in public spaces to communicate with men without saying a single word. The handkerchief was the most versatile instrument of that code. Holding it in the right hand and passing it to the left meant one thing. Dropping it accidentally in front of a specific man meant another. Carrying it folded against the chest while glancing sideways was as clear a signal as a written message, for those who knew how to read it. Men knew it, women knew it, and neither of them spoke about it openly. It was a parallel language that existed beneath the official language of the time. But there is something that interrupts this romantic image of signals, handkerchiefs, and glances in church. Economic reality changed everything depending on where you were born. A noblewoman had access to these courtship rituals, but almost no real freedom of choice. Her body was a family asset. A peasant woman, on the other hand, had far fewer symbolic resources, but far more practical freedom. She could speak directly to a man at the market. She could invite him to eat. She could appear alone on his path without destroying her name forever. The rules of the game were completely different depending on social class. What for an aristocrat was freedom disguised as protocol, for a peasant was protocol disguised as freedom. And in the middle of all this, there was a category of woman who broke both structures: the widow. A widow in 1500 was, legally and socially, the woman with the greatest autonomy of the entire era. She had already fulfilled her function within the system. She had already been married. She had already had children. Or not, no one could sell her like a commodity because she had already passed through that market. And if her husband had left her anything, she managed it herself. She could choose to marry again, or choose not to. In many European cities, she even had her own legal voice. So when a widow decided she wanted a man, the process was completely different, more direct. In a way, more honest. She could invite him to her house without causing an immediate scandal. She could negotiate the terms of courtship from a position no unmarried woman could even imagine. Treatises of the time. And yes, there were treatises about how women should behave, almost always written by men, described widows seeking husbands as a threat. Too independent, too aware of what they wanted. That alone confirms the system feared exactly that, a woman who knew what she was doing. But let's return to the women who were not widows, because that is where the story becomes complicated in a way no one expects. The letters. In the 15th century and early 16th century, female literacy was generally low, but not non-existent, and in the social groups where it existed, daughters of wealthy merchants, women of the lower nobility, some educated in convents, the personal letter became a weapon of astonishing effectiveness. A woman who could write had access to something no public gesture could provide, the ability to say exactly what she felt, with time to think, without witnesses, and with the possibility of denying it if things went wrong. The love letters that survived from that era, and very few survived because most were destroyed for safety, show a level of emotional and rhetorical sophistication that completely contradicts the image of the passive, silent, medieval woman. They argued, they persuaded, they reminded men of promises, they referenced past meetings. They even used the religious language of the time to wrap declarations that outside that context would have been considered scandalous. A woman in 1500 who wanted a man and knew how to write was, in truth, the most dangerous person in the room. And no one saw her coming. Now comes the detail that changes the entire perspective. There was a documented practice in several regions of Spain, Italy, and southern France that had different names depending on the area, but worked the same everywhere. A woman who wanted a man would send him a gift of food prepared by herself. It was not a casual gesture. It was a formal declaration. The quality of the gift, the type of food, and the moment it was sent all communicated something precise. An almond sweet meant initial interest. A stew made with expensive spices meant serious intention. And if he accepted it, ate it, and later returned the empty container with something inside. A coin, a branch, a piece of cloth, the courtship was officially open. It was a contract without words, completely functional, and completely invisible to the fathers, priests, and brothers who watched every movement. All of this builds a picture that official history rarely shows. The woman of 1500 did not simply wait. She acted within the limits the system imposed on her. But inside those limits, she developed systems of communication, negotiation, and seduction of a complexity any strategist today would easily recognize. The system was designed to control them. They designed a parallel system to move inside it. And the most disturbing part is that it worked. There are records of marriages from the time where the real choice came from the woman. Even though the official document said otherwise, she had chosen the man long before he believed he had chosen her. It wasn't magic. It was intelligence applied to a hostile context. If this video raised a question you didn't have before you started watching it, write it in the comments. And if you want more history told without decoration, subscribe. The next video is going to make more than a few people uncomfortable.